Good morning, everyone. This is Louise Carcione, and you are watching Mental Health in Your Neighborhood. Thank you for being with me this morning. Those people who watch me on a regular basis are part of the broadcast, and those who are watching for the first time will learn about our mind, body, and spirit, which are connected. And even if you are referred to someone for a mental health evaluation, it's okay. It's just like if you were referred to a medical doctor if you had diabetes. Not to worry, but all three are connected. And everything we talk about here has a value, I think, in sharing with you information from people who we don't hear about and we don't read about in the news and on TV. But anyway, this morning I have a guest who has been my guest who brought a guest. How do you like that? Beverly Byron. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to come again. It's a pleasure to be here.
And
I have with me, would you like me to introduce my friend?
I want you to get closer to the
Okay.
microphone. Yes, and I would like you to introduce the person that you brought, that you introduced to me today for the first time.
Okay, this is a good friend, Sara Mitchell. I've known her for several years, and she can sort of introduce herself. She has done a lot of different things in the Boston area, and most currently is part of the staff at Starlight Ministries, which is an outreach to those who are affected by homelessness. But she's done a lot of different things over the years. So, Sara Mitchell, take it away.
Great. Well, welcome, Sara.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. I do want to hear about what you're doing currently, but at some point I would like to hear about what you've done prior to this as well. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So actually, in a sense, what I'm doing now is sort of an out branching or something
Outreach.
that's something that's grown out of what I've done all along. So I came to Boston to work for the Emmanuel Gospel Center, and initially I was co-manager of a bilingual bookstore. And at the bookstore we sold Christian books in English, Spanish, and then Haitian, Creole, and shoot, I could sell you a Bible in almost any language there is, or in some other books. Eventually, more material was available by internet, and so that didn't seem to be such an important thing for me to be doing. So God moved me over to where I am now, back in 2001, working with Starlight Ministry, with those experiencing homelessness, but also members of the church to reach out to those folks who are experiencing homelessness.
Okay. Well, I've had people on my broadcast before that have talked about homelessness because, as my regulars know, people who are released from prison oftentimes go directly to the homeless shelter in Boston with a plastic bag with their stuff in it. And oftentimes they're not able to find a place to live because of their history. So that is really a great support that I hear you're offering. Yeah. So do you go to the shelter and pick them up and bring them to Starlight?
No. At Starlight, we actually try to intersect with people at lots of different locations. So we do have at our building a drop-in center where people can, and Beverly's been there as well, people can get a shower, they can get a change of clothes, they can get a haircut. They can, more importantly, get some friendship, a word of prayer, a word of encouragement. So that's one time when we intersect with people. Then I do, in fact, go to a Bible study at the shelter. And last year we did like the whole 12 steps of biblical example in the Bible for each of the 12 steps. That was really cool. Right now we're going through the book of Mark. And then we have done some journaling in the women's shelter, more or less a chance for people to express themselves. Sort of, we get a prompt or a topic to for conversation, so then we can just relate on that. We do street outreach as well. And what's really great is we sort of dovetail with churches, so many people that come to the drop-in center will also come to our church that is in the same building. And also there's a church, Congregational Line of Judah on Northampton Street that has like a Saturday morning breakfast, but then many people go there on Sunday to church as well. So I think, the church is really the place where people can get connected to community. And so that's really the best situation.
Now, am I correct in assuming that some of your clients, they end up being your clients, I
We
assume?
call them our guests.
Your guests,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so some of your guests might be people who were involved in domestic violence?
Oh, yes, yes.
Right. Yeah.
We've just the other day I had a woman who was trying to get an address because she couldn't get her ID without having an address. But yet when she wanted to get her ID, she wanted to have it hidden. But she couldn't even apply for that until she had an ID. So it was very difficult.
Yes, I know, and I understand that Secretary Galvin is setting up some kind of option for people who don't want their address to be known. I know the P.O. box works for some people, but you have to put out some money to get a P.O. box, and in some post offices, you have to wait until there's one available.
And the state won't send any official document to a P.O. box. So you have to get the address first, and then you can,
Right.
so.
Yeah, so it's not that easy. It's not as easy as it sounds on TV.
Right.
That's why I think it's important for people to hear from people like you and Beverly, because you tell us things that I might have said before, but someone might not have been listening. They might have forgotten about it, or maybe I didn't even know about it. And it's important for people to know that this is a place to find out something that might be helpful in your life.
Absolutely.
It might be helpful in your mind, it might be helpful in your body or in your spirit. And you've talked about the spiritual part of the your guests. Anyway, that's good. Beverly, did you want to add anything to that?
Just that, again, how important it is to connect the body, mind, and spirit. And that is being done through the outreach from Starlight Ministry. And one of the things I think that I find most helpful and important for me is just the opportunity for people, for the guests to come and to have an opportunity to share their story and to connect with people and to get encouragement and hope in sometimes very difficult situations that they're dealing with. So I think that's important. Then it addresses the body in terms of the opportunity to get a shower as well as to get clothes. And for those who might be interested also, one thing that I have really benefited from was the training that the staff does for those who wish to volunteer. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the training and what that entails.
Sure. There are people, individuals involved in helping out folks that are experiencing homelessness. And yet there's always going to be more. And really, it's so much better if there are people like in different churches in all walks of life that are sensitive, that are trained, that know, just are wise in interacting with folks. And so really, I mean, the actual venues where we help connect people with people experiencing homelessness, that's only part of our job. The other part, as you said, is the training, because we want churches and individuals in churches to actually be motivated and do their own thing. That's how there's another group, Forest Hills Forest Hills Covenant Church, ended up starting their own Saturday morning breakfast. And there too, people who've gone to that end up coming to the church. Just this last weekend, one of the things that they're just really so fabulous at is hospitality. And so Starlight and Forest Hills together do an Easter banquet, and it was so great. There was a woman who had been visited by the folks from that church several years ago. Then she came to the Saturday morning breakfast, met another gentleman there, and then became part of the church, was married in the church, and is now, part of the church and volunteering as well.
Okay, so there's a give back there.
Absolutely.
That's very good. The other thing that occurs to me, too, is that when someone is homeless for a variety of reasons, I've mentioned prison, also jail, people involved in domestic violence situation, or something has happened in their family. But there's also the address issue, there's Social Security, there's insurance, there's all of that sometimes people do not realize what's involved in making application for those services.
Absolutely, yeah. I think one of the best things that's happened recently is just the availability of phones. But sort of, as they call them, Obama phones. Even there, you have to have an ID first. There's a wonderful organization, Boston Share Network, that collects funds and have given us some funds so that we can help people, actually give them a money order so that they can get their ID. So if they have all their, if they're experiencing homelessness and they have all their documents together, I will help them get that. Then I will give them the money. I will pass the money along to them, is better, better said, so they can get it.
And it's also important because although we all walk around, every one of us at this table has one of these, I know. But there are many people, in particular those coming out of jail for a long time, who don't know how to use it. So that's another step that has to be taken. Even if you hand someone a phone, if they've never used it, they don't know how to turn it on, they don't know how to keep the battery alive. There's so much.
One of our guests had just come out of being incarcerated for 17 years, and he was just totally mystified. It was not the Boston he knew. So many of the things were just totally new.
I can remember someone that was in the pre-release center, and he was born and raised in Roxbury, and he went to Boston for something, and then coming back, he couldn't remember the name of the bus he was supposed to take in Dudley, and so he took the wrong bus and ended up in Forest Hills, and then the problem he had was that he knew he was going to be late getting back to the pre-release center, and that could automatically mean that he would be returned to the prison. So he came to my office instead. And I called the head of the pre-release center, and I said, Mr. So-and-so is sitting in my office. I'm looking right at him. I'm going to walk him up to the pre-release center door. Will you please have a conversation with me and him? And that's what we had to do.
Yeah.
And it was just a matter of believability. Like who's going to believe a person who's been in prison for a number of years? This guy was a Vietnam veteran, too. And he did not know how to use this. He was born and raised in Roxbury. I was born in Boston, raised in Alston. But I know all the neighborhoods of the city of Boston and all of the counties because of my assignment.
Thank God he knew where your office was.
Oh,
He
yes.
would have been up a creek.
Yeah. Well, it was at the same address. That was a good deal. That was a good deal. He was sitting on the floor outside of my locked door, and when I got to my office, our secretary said, "There's someone sitting in front of your door. Are you going to be all right?" And I said, "It'll be fine." And it sure was. But and he was not returned to prison because I was the legitimate conversation that could go with why he was late. But those kinds of things can happen too.
Absolutely.
I know that in the shelters, for example, people have to be back by a certain time or they cannot get their bed.
Right.
Wow.
And even if they get back, there might be a mattress on the floor or a mat on the floor. You wouldn't even call it a mattress a lot of times. But,
Right. So, so that how long has this been going on? I think that's important to some people. And do people have to come from Boston in order to be involved in this program?
Oh, absolutely not. We don't ask for anything when people come in. We do read them our expectations of behavior. So I say, it's a long list. But I say, this is for your protection, not to, not to frustrate you. But that's the only thing that we ask, that people respect themselves and each other when they come in and behave accordingly. No, you don't need to come in. Now, what's interesting is there are a lot of people who are from Boston. Then there are a lot of people who maybe at some point have lived in Boston, have moved away, and then come back. Boston has really amazing services for people who are falling through the cracks in other, in various situations, and end up being on the street, so to speak. And so people from other places are coming back.
Good.
And I don't blame them. I think there may be a little bit of resentment at some point, but from other people or even from agencies, like, why are we taking care of people from all over the place? But the need is there, and thank God we have a wonderful sort of network of help. And most of it is secular, but because recovery, which in many cases is part of the homeless scene, along with mental illness and just so many other situations, the medical and the Public Health Commission recognize the spiritual dimension in recovery and health. And so for the, in several places they do allow us to bring spiritual truths. And I think there's an element of respect now so that we can very easily move into lots of the different areas.
Someone always tries to call me when I'm on the air, but I don't answer the phone because they can use the telephone number that's printed right on the screen. Renee, do you want to tell people what programs they're able to access this broadcast if they don't get to see it live?
If they don't see it live, they can go to our webpage, bostonpraiseradio.tv, and it will be uploaded. It's uploaded on YouTube. You can call in to our audio now. We're on many different venues, but we encourage all who listen to go to our webpage, and you can see Mental Health in Your Neighborhood, as well as many of our other broadcasters who broadcast throughout the week and on the weekend.
Thank you. She's the studio manager. That's important. How you doing, Beverly?
Very well.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything that your friend?
Well, I think that you had asked how long had Starlight been in existence,
Mhm.
Oh.
so you can speak to that.
So Starlight started in 1990. It has an interesting story in that a woman who had been doing some short-term missions abroad, and she came home and she saw all these people in need back in 1990. So she went home and made some peanut butter sandwiches and got some socks, took all her father's socks and went downtown to the common. And what was interesting is she didn't just start handing them out. Here, I'm sure you guys are hungry, but rather sat there and asked different people, where they get resources, what help they can get. So from the very beginning, there was this learning from the people we're serving. A lot of things have changed since then. A lot more services are available, so we really don't hand out sandwiches. In fact, we don't really recommend people to go down to the common to hand out sandwiches, because there's just a lot of people who do that, and that isn't really, there's places for people to eat every single day. And homeless guests have told us that anybody who goes hungry really is just being lazy, because there's a place for them to be. Not lazy in the general sense, but, just hasn't gone to the places. Of course, there's times when people, would love a cup of coffee, and I think it's the wonderful thing when you're talking with someone and get to be friendly, to invite them for a cup of coffee. It's a wonderful thing.
But the other thing, too, is, again, going back to why we're on this broadcast, if you don't know about Starlight, you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's critically important to people who might be listening, or to people who are listening who know of other people that might qualify to be able to go. Do you want to give out your address and phone number?
Absolutely. So the drop-in is only one day a week because, like I say, we're in other places. Our goal isn't to fully serve at our drop-in, but our drop-in is on Thursday afternoon from 12. The last person in is at 2:30, so 12 to 3, but we want to be able to take care of people well. And that's at number 2 San Juan Street in the South End. So that's part of the Via Victoria area. If you know where Blackstone Park and Blackstone School is, we're just across from there. So it's number 2 San Juan in the South End. And the number there is 617-262-4567. You can ask for Starlight or you can ask for Sara. And we'll be happy to, if you're interested in reaching out to your neighbors who are on the street, or if you're in need, give us a call. We're more than happy to. If we can't do anything ourselves, we'd like to point you to someone who maybe can.
Okay. So the time that the drop-in center is open is one period of time.
Correct.
But then the other times when people can actually call can be any time
Sure.
during the day.
If we're not there, just leave a message.
Right, okay. And I assume that you have some connection with Boston Food Bank?
Actually, we don't, because we don't, our location, which is, Starlight is part of the Emmanuel Gospel Center, and we do not have an official kitchen.
Okay.
So all we give actually is pastries and coffee. So we take care of the body
Okay.
more in the clothes department than in the food department.
Yeah, okay, because I know that I've had someone from Boston Food Bank on the broadcast as
Yeah.
well. And there's a connection right on Washington Street here
Yes.
in Codman
Yes,
Square.
absolutely.
So that's important. And,
Yeah.
and again, as I said, I'm not doing commercials here.
Right.
I'm just talking about services that are available for people who need them. And since I worked for the Department of Mental Health, and I know the Department of Mental Health, for example, You just can't walk into the mental health center, the mental health hospital, and say, "Here I am, fix me, take care of me." I mean, there are certain procedures that have to be followed there as well.
And you can't go in there and say, "Jesus loves you, you'll get better."
Yeah.
It's true. Jesus does love you, but you need to know how to approach the organization. I don't know if you can go in a mental hospital. Like, oh yeah, you can.
Yeah.
We did Christmas caroling once.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, you need to be training. And sometimes we get calls from people like, I see this person on my way to work every day. I'm concerned about them. What can I do? So we're here to help the person who wants to reach out as well as the person who's particularly in need.
You got it. That's exactly my point. That's my point. You are listening to Mental Health in Your Neighborhood. Mental health is important to everyone sitting at this table, including me. So,
Amen to that.
yes, right. Beverly, you want to add anything else?
I was just going to say that in terms of the training, one thing I think that I found most helpful and was helpful for a lot of people that I know have gone through the training is that there's a component where it helps you to get in touch with your feelings or prejudices that you might have regarding the homeless, or preconceived notions about why people are homeless, what these statistics might be, and to sort of debunk the myths
Yes.
that are so prevalent, and that people seem to just really become enamored with. And to find that there are many different reasons for homelessness, and that we could all be in that situation at some point. And then how do you try to help people in that situation?
Right.
We have lots of volunteers that come, or even people that take the training, and our whole point is not transactional. Here's some food, here's some whatever, but rather transformational. And we find that people themselves that are helping out are transformed so much. They feel like they're the beneficiary of help rather than the other person. So it's really mutual transformation is our, we're there to help develop mutually transformational relationships with those experiencing homelessness.
Perfect. That's a good definition. It's really important. I also want to remind folks that they can call in if they have a question, 617-282-0685. Renee would be happy to answer the phone and pass it off to us. And a reason why most people don't call during the broadcast is that Renee will have to tell them to turn their audio down, so they won't be able to hear what's going on while they're waiting for me to say, "You're online, go ahead."
Yeah.
And so a lot of people don't call until after the broadcast, or they send me an email or a text message and say, "I had a question about that woman that was and so that's important for people to know that you're welcome to call. But if you want to call later, or if you want to look at the many different platforms that are available to you, you can do that as well. So
I could also say that our website is at EGC, it stands for Emmanuel Gospel Center, but egc.org, and then look under the programs for homeless ministry, which would be Starlight.
okay, so that would be a source for someone to get information about how to refer someone if they want to do that.
More than anything, it's we talk about homeless, how people end up getting homeless, understanding how they get out of homelessness,
Right.
different blogs and stuff. So, and also how to contact us if they forget. So the number is real easy, 617-262-4567. So.
Good for you. You got that. You got that going. Okay. So, Beverly, when did you start doing what she's talking about?
Let's see, I don't know. I'm trying to remember, maybe 2 or 3 years ago?
Something like
Something,
that,
yeah.
yeah.
But I had actually heard of Starlight during the time when my daughter was a student at Parkside Christian Academy. And one of the things they did with the students there, and she was in preschool, kindergarten, and first grade, was that they would try to involve the children in different things outside of the academic environment, basically. So there was a spiritual component and a real opportunity for them to develop a caring
Right,
and
right.
compassionate attitude towards those around them.
Right.
And one of the things that they did, they would do the sock drive, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And I think at one time they did chapstick. They collected chapstick for them, and for I think at one point the children were actually involved in making the sandwiches.
Sandwiches, yeah.
So from
That was
the
a long
time
That was
when-
before I was even.
so from the time my daughter was
Yeah.
probably 4 years old,
Wow.
Wow.
till she was 6 or 7, and now she's almost 30. So it was
And-
a
and-
while ago that
and-
they started that.
And your daughter, Ava, is also a broadcaster
Yes, she
on
is.
this studio, in this studio. There
Yes,
you
she
go.
is,
See
yeah.
the connection, folks? We're connected. It's important. It's all important. And I know, I know when I was thinking about retiring from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I retired. They hired me back in 3 days. And then I was called back another time after I retired. But a lot of people, when they think about retirement, they think, I'll never do that again. But there are certain kinds of experiences people have where it's important to stay in. And it's important to me to let people know that they need not be fearful of asking for help for a mental illness, for an addiction. Those are medical problems. And I know that if someone has a heart condition, they may have to take medication for the rest of their lives. So if they have a serious mental health condition, they may be prescribed medication that they have to take for a long period of time or for the rest of their lives. But that's part of what healing is about. And then what you do with your environment helps the mental health part. So that's really all important.
Yeah.
And that's why having you on this broadcast is so important, because I want people to see who they might see if they show up at that address. And I also wanted to remind folks, those people who come from outside of Boston, the South End is legally Roxbury.
Yes.
I know. And you want to keep in mind that when you go on the Starlight website, you want to look at the zip code as well. Yeah, because that's important. And I know that. I know that because there are people. When I went to Africa and when I've been to Italy and we've had people. There's a wonderful woman that I've become friends with who lives in Australia, who watches the broadcasts, many of them. And many people do not realize that when you say Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Allston, Brighton, Back Bay, South End, whatever, that's all Boston, Massachusetts.
Our little neighborhoods.
Yeah, they're neighborhoods, yes. So there are 13 legitimate neighborhoods, but the neighborhood of Dorchester, for example, has 10 subgroups.
It's a really big.
The neighborhood is huge. There are thousands of people who live in Dorchester. It's the largest neighborhood in population as well as geography. So that's important. And I forgot to mention, Sarah, that this broadcast goes around the world.
I heard that, and I know that it's even internationally. Can I greet the brothers and sisters in Spanish-speaking countries? Dios le bendiga, hermanos. Es un gran placer visitar con ustedes y este es un programa bien lindo que tiene la señora Louise. Cuídense y Dios le bendiga. Amén. That was high. God bless you.
Gracias. I appreciate that because a couple of weeks ago I interviewed someone from Nepal who I met in Thailand, and she sat in your chair.
Oh.
So this, and she was so excited to know that she could be on a broadcast that her people in her country could collect. I'm not sure what the time difference is for the live part of it,
Yeah.
but for the platforms, as Renee mentioned, or as you can see when you go to Boston Parades Radio, there are so many ways to access this broadcast after the fact. And that's important.
Yeah.
And that's important. And this woman from Nepal was just so excited to be able to be here. And other people who have been on the broadcast have said, may I say it in my own language? and what you did was perfectly fine, perfectly fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Renee, how is we've got some people watching, I assume?
People watching, and your granddaughter said hi.
Oh, my granddaughter is a regular. Okay. And yes, she's also in Special Olympics, but
Oh.
she's a regular.
That's good.
But anyway, that is really nice to know because it's important. I mean, sometimes I think, I know you mentioned it about people having a negative attitude about homelessness, and sometimes it's not really so much a negative attitude, but it's a frustration because they don't know how to help. So they just walk right by people rather than say anything because they don't know what to say. And yet, if they watch this broadcast and they hear about other things that are available, they hear about this church, for example, they hear about your church, about the church you're talking about, then that's going to make a difference because the people who are frustrated because they have nothing to say might now have something to say.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the best things about our drop-in center, about the different outreaches that we have, is that we can offer a listening ear, and we can offer prayer, and for sometimes it's like the only person they may be talking to that day that isn't paid for it and really isn't out to get something from them, either information or something else. So it's really important. One of the things that we like to do, sort of the process we have is we have like a slip of paper where people can put in what they need, what size shirt they are. And then our volunteers, some of which are retired and are like, I want to, I'm finally out of the office. I want to do something with people.
Right.
So they will be like personal shoppers for them and go into our back room where Beverly has donated several clothes and socks and toiletries, which are so important. Anybody who wants to do a sock drive, let us know.
Right.
That is the most valuable thing for a person who's walking all day long. Anyway, the person will fill it out, give them choices. We don't just say, here, this is what you have, but give choices. And then we say, so we're praying people, we believe in prayer. Is there something we can pray for? And that's when their story comes out. And we pray right then if they feel like it. And if not, we say, well, after you're gone, we have a time together where we debrief and we pray for each person. And that's where we have something to offer, that there's no agency. Believers have something that can't come from any other agency.
I also want to mention that if folks know of veterans who are depressed, who might have post-trauma and are not seeking services, that might be a good opportunity for them as well, because as I have mentioned on this broadcast, 22 veterans a day in this country commit suicide, and some of the people in prison commit suicide. So it's important for those of you who are watching, listening, trying to consider how you might plug in and become part of this process, there's something you might do that somebody else doesn't want to do, and that might be important to Sara. Yeah.
So, absolutely. Everybody has something that they can offer.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone.
And you're not just asking for volunteers to bring money and
No.
hand money in.
Right.
That you're
I
actually.
mean, we do need money.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. No, that's practical. That's practical.
Right, yeah.
Isn't today the last day of the year for applying filing taxes
I think so.
in Massachusetts? Yes. Today's the last day. No, yesterday. I'm sorry. It was
No, it's
yesterday.
today. Because it's today because there was
Today
a ho-
because
yeah,
of emancipation.
yeah, there was a holiday in
Yes.
Because of the marathon.
Washington. Yeah,
Monday-
because the
no.
marathon for Massachusetts and it's a federal holiday yesterday or today in Washington D.C. I'm not sure what the holiday was, but I heard it on the
Emancipation.
news. Okay.
It's
Okay,
emancipation.
great.
Okay.
But Monday, the marathon day is really Patriots Day.
Right.
And that started in Concord and Lexington, and it moved over to 30,000 runners in Hopkinton, where I raised my children.
Oh,
And I came back to Boston because it made more sense to me to be back in my hometown.
absolutely.
But the other thing is that going back to what you said about you don't turn people away if they come from Hopkinton or they come from Marlborough or they come from Westboro or someplace else, because there are probably no services like those that you might be offering available to people in this suburban towns that they originally come from. That's important. I really think that's important. But I know that that's one of the conditions in terms of the Department of Mental Health. Each of the area offices, the DMH area offices, has a geographic pattern of response. So that your address means something there. But
Yeah.
in your case, it doesn't.
Right.
It
right.
doesn't.
And we, depends on where you are, where we can guide you to. I mean, somebody from out in Hopkinton's probably not, if they're in these kind of situations, unless they have, their situation has sort of, in a sense, deteriorated such that they're in the shelter now, then they would be coming. They probably aren't going to be coming, obviously, from Hopkinton necessarily.
Yeah, it's
although
a-
we've had families that
Yeah.
have been living in cars, and then we'll hear about them and sort of direct them.
That's another.
So I used to be called a community advocate because I would sort of match services with what a person needs. Now I'm a ministry coach because, in a sense, I'm helping other people become community advocates so that they can match resources and people who need them.
Something else I've learned I did not know. Nice. Yes, very good. Beverly?
Well, it was after I retired that I actually connected with Starlight on this level. And so it's been a very rewarding experience. Not only do I have a chance to meet new people, but to share God's love with people I would not have otherwise crossed paths with. And not just in terms of those who come who are affected by the homelessness condition, but even the other volunteers. So it's been interesting to meet them, to hear their stories about their lives and how they got to be where they are and who they are. And one thing that I really appreciate too is, I love shopping, so I get to be a personal shopper for people, and that is just so, I
It's
appreciate
fun.
that so much. It is fun. It really, really is.
Okay.
And the guests have a choice about things that they want to accept or to receive, which I think is really important, just in terms of empowering people, letting them know that they do have, their voices matter. And then the other thing that I'm concerned about as well is that I think it's important for everyone to know, in terms of the political situation, what the candidates who are running for different offices believe about different people's situations and how to address them. You know, from, you know, the warming centers not being open when the weather gets warm, and then people just have to be on the street, and different situations that I think that we, as citizens, need to be aware of and need to be concerned about, and hold the elected officials accountable to address situations of people who are disenfranchised, who may not have a voice. And I think it's part of our responsibility as Christians as well.
And that whole voting election thing is so critically important because, excuse me, what a lot of people forget is that whomever is elected works for us. Whether we voted for them or not, they work for us.
And the primaries are important, or else your choices aren't going to be very, you know, aren't going to be what you want to choose from.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's really important. And I know that I've talked about this with Pastor Bruce, who is the CEO of Boston Praise Radio and my pastor at this church. But the number of people who have registered to vote don't vote because they think their single vote doesn't matter. But it does. It does. Because if your vote isn't there, I mean, I've known that in the suburbs, I think last local election, someone won by 60 votes.
Wow.
60
Yeah.
votes.
Wow.
That's a big difference. That means every vote counted in that case.
Absolutely.
So that's important. Also, once people have an address and they are free from serving time or being in the hospital, they can register to vote and vote in Massachusetts.
Right. Even the shelters have voter registration. Like St. Francis House has voter registration.
Yes, I've been there. Yeah.
And I think the 112 Southampton shelter, as well as the women's shelter at Woods Mullen.
Right, exactly. So all of these things are connected, folks. Mind, body, spirit, everything we've talked about is connected. And you are connected because you're watching.
That's right.
So now, since we're probably going to run out of time soon, what kind of a message would, Sara, you first and then you, Beverly, what message would you like to direct to those people who are watching or who will watch on other platforms? I'll give you 4 minutes.
Whoa. Whoa. I guess, sort of like voting, that whatever you do it as unto the Lord, and it will make a difference. If you, that extending your hand in friendship really makes a difference to people. You want to be smart about it, and that's what the body of Christ is here to help you do that in a meaningful manner. But everybody has something that they can offer to their neighbor. I just want to say one thing, good news travels fast, or at least Beverly is a great example of that, because she gets excited about something, and she has been excited about Starlight, and so she invites all the other people, why don't you come to the training? Why don't you come to the training? And then, using some of the principles of the training, when doing something, an outreach in the church, she mentioned that rather than just sort of giving the Easter basket or giving the Thanksgiving basket, just really sat down and talked, what are the things what's on your mind? And, that just made me very happy. And just as an example of what everybody can do something, if if you're willing, God will use you.
There you go. Okay, Beverly? Oh, I'm going to give you 3 minutes.
Well, I guess my experience has been that if we make ourselves available to God, He will use us in ways that we may not even see the significance of it at that moment.
That's true,
But
too.
because we walk by faith and not by sight, and all that we do is by faith, we can trust that at some point what we do will have an impact on people's lives.
And it
then
will
not
be a
only that-
surprise.
yes. And then the impact you have on that person's life, that person will have an impact on someone else's life. So you just have this rippling effect that it's just, to me, just really exciting to see it happen, to see it evolve, and to see how it comes about. And as you said, I think there are, like, people who someone was telling me last week how they go through downtown crossing, I guess, on their commute to work, and they see just a whole group of those who are homeless, who are just congregating in different areas downtown, and they wonder what can they do to help, you know. And one person had been asking for a cup of coffee, and people were just passing them by, and she just felt that, you know, she was the one to give him or to take him for a cup of coffee, you know. So those acts of kindness. And then I remember one year I was, when I was working at the Brook Courthouse, and I had an intern who was a social work student from one of the Christian colleges, from Gordon College, and just it touched my heart how she befriended a homeless person that she would pass by every day. And she asked him his name, and she'd sit down and spend her lunchtime, have a conversation with them. And she called him, I can't remember his name, but she called him Mr. So-and-so. And for him, that was so important for him to be addressed as Mr. somebody, you know,
Right,
with
yes,
his name.
yes.
And so for me, that was just a challenge and a lesson in terms of what we can be doing. And of course, you know, you want to be discerning in the midst of doing that, but yet there are opportunities that God gives us to make a difference in people's lives.
I think we're making a difference here, ladies. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Beverly, for bringing Sarah.
Thank you.
And obviously, I'm going to want to have both of you come back another time, individually or together. Either one, we'll do it again. And last week I was in Alabama, and next week I'm going to be in Oregon, but I will be back on the broadcast in time to talk with you all again. So please, please share any information you picked up today that sounds valuable. Use it yourself, pass it on to someone else. You're a connection. We need you. All of the things I've mentioned, everything Sarah and Beverly have mentioned, can give somebody hope. See you next week. This is Louise Carcione. See you then.